The Sound Off Podcast. The show about podcast and broadcast. Starts now.
You know what? It seems highly inappropriate that we would have Randi Chase on the show twice before we had her co-host Vinnie Taylor on. Vinnie Taylor has been in Red Deer doing morning radio for over a decade now. He's humble, kind, friendly, and if you're looking for references, look no further than his co-host, Randi Chase.
You know, Vinnie and I, when I first talked to you, we just kind of started the show. And it was always great. Like, we always had really good chemistry and got along really well. But now he's just like, it feels like he's family to me, you know? We've never had a fight, not one fight. And we've been doing mornings for 5 years in January. So I'm pretty proud of our relationship.
I feel like I know Vinnie, although I've never met Vinnie, because I listen to the show. And so Vinnie doesn't know this, but I know Vinnie. He's my best friend.
Oh, he's going to be so happy. You should invite him on the podcast sometimes, because I think when I said I was coming on your podcast, he was like, oh, you know, I've never been asked. I was like, oh, he'll ask you after this.
So I did. Now, Vinnie Taylor joins me from the Stingray studios in Red Deer, Alberta.
There's no rules in the podcast game, correct?
They say that there's no rules, but there are rules, and the listeners make them up, and when they get bored, they just stop listening, and you lose.
Sounds like radio.
It is. It's kind of the same in that sense, right? Vinnie, roll it right back to the beginning for me. What was your first radio job?
My very first radio job was in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, an AM radio station. Now, you got to think back. This is way before there was any technology that we have today. So there were no computers. There was no internet. There were no websites, none of that stuff. Everything we did was play records, 45s, albums. All our commercials were on carts. We had religious programming at night on reel-to-reel. And all our production was done on reel-to-reel.
Are you going to put a year on that? Because I'll give it about 1982.
1983.
Oh, I was off by 1 year.
Yep.
What radio station were you raised on?
I went to high school in Edmonton. So this is how I actually got into radio, taking a work experience program in my high school. And they said, pick 2 jobs. We'll set you up with 2 jobs. You get to go there, and then you get school credit for it. Way easier than going to school. So I worked at a van conversion shop, because at the time, back in the day, everybody had pimped out vans. And then I got to work at 630 Ched, kind of an intern deal. And I got to work with everybody from Rob Christie to Jungle Jay and Chuck Chandler, all those guys. And I thought, this is the coolest job ever. This is what I want to do. When I got out of high school, I enrolled in the infamous Columbia School of Broadcasting. And after I graduated from there, because I didn't graduate from high school, I actually got into radio.
Weyburn, Saskatchewan, 1983. It's almost the peak of the top 40 in music era, because every record is great. Even the country records were great at that point. So what were you playing, and what was your shift?
I was working evenings at the time and was playing everything from Journey to the Rolling Stones. The big station, though, at the time in Saskatchewan was, of course, CHAB, 800 CHAB. That's the one that everybody wanted to go work at.
I find it amazing that, you know, the people who do go start in Saskatchewan, it's Weyburn, it's Rosetown.
Estevan.
Estevan's another one.
Prince Albert.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you head to you can do the border thing, you can head out to Lloyd. But yeah, I've spoken to a few people on this podcast who have had great success getting their shows, getting their careers started and launched in Saskatchewan. I think a few weeks ago we had Bryn Griffiths on, and he was talking about his time in Saskatchewan. And how long did you last in Saskatchewan?
I worked Weyburn for about 1.5 years, Rosetown for 1.5 years, and then I got a big break. I got to work at 65 CKLM in Saskatoon. It was a super station back then, and I got a chance to work with my heroes, Brent Laux, Penny Murphy. We were doing a morning show at that time. Red Allen was doing middays. I ended up doing drive, and then got transferred to Calgary back in, I guess, in the 90s, and worked there for a decade.
And I was just thinking in my head when you were saying, oh, Saskatchewan Superstation, I was about ready to go CKOM, because those were the first Saskatchewan call letters that came to my mind when you said you were, you know, everybody wanted to work at a big station.
That was so much fun. And that's when I started working with Gayle Zarbatany. I worked with her for probably 14 years in Ralco, and one of the best program directors. She was awesome. She brought me into Calgary, and that's when I worked with my very first co-host. I had to change my name, of course, because her name was Angela Knight. So they wanted me to go by Michael Day. So it was the Day and Night Show. Brilliant, right?
I like it.
Angela, right now, actually, is doing the morning show in Calgary at CBC. Very successful.
And that was that a morning show?
No, that was Afternoon Drive. A couple of years into that, they got the license for an FM station, and they launched Kiss FM 96.9, which at the time was one of the very first stations across the country that mixed music together. So we were the only station that played a mixture of pop, rock, and country. So you go like from the Goo Goo Dolls into Garth Brooks, for example. That kind of stuff. This is like 1997 when they launched that station, and got to work with Jerry Steen, Karen Daniels were doing the morning show, the late Tim Kilpatrick. Big Daddy Don Ritchie was doing middays. I was doing drive. And then a year after that station launched, a legend came into my life, and that would be Peppermint Patti. She moved from Montreal to Calgary, and she started doing stuff on my show, and we ended up doing the morning show for about a year before they sold the station.
Now, I do remember that period, and I remember when the station launched with great fanfare. And I think we need to remind people about what it was like in the 90s and how it was possible in a place like Calgary to play Shania Twain, Alanis Morissette, Goo Goo Dolls, and have a very diverse playlist of both pop and pop country. And it really was the birth of the pop country era.
Yeah, and it also kind of was, I guess you could say, a precursor to what would become the Jack FM format later down the road, right? Playing what we want. Almost kind of the same thing.
And I think back to Gayle Zarbatany and all the work that she put into that station. And I just remember keeping my eye on it and just being fascinated by the whole thing, because that period of the 90s was, the pop was just phenomenal at that time. The NSYNCs and, the mother-daughter, they could listen to the same music on the way to school. And then a station like Kiss would be on there and would really be the antithesis to CJ92, which is what you were up against, Jerry Forbes.
Hard to go up against a guy like Jerry Forbes, I love Jerry.
Well, no one survived.
No, of course not. That station did very well for about a year and a half, Kiss FM 96.9, and then Power signed on, and that was kind of the downfall of the station.
Yeah, somebody came in and ate part of your lunch.
Yes, exactly. And then Rogers came in and bought the station from Ralco, and I ended up getting let go. So then I went back to Saskatchewan and worked in Regina, 2000 at Z99, CC and Laurie, and then they got a license for another FM station, so I got to be part of another launch of Rock 94, which was very cool.
I want to talk for a moment about Peppermint Patti, because she had just been in Montreal, and she had been in a tumultuous situation with, morning show, Terry DeMonte left, and then John Derringer came in, and then there was another incarnation, I think, and she'd been through a lot of co-hosts. And I do remember at that time, because I was working up in Edmonton, that I would visit her, and in 97, I did go down and visit her. And I think she was a little bit shocked at just how much fun it was to work with you. But I thought it was great that she got to go work in an environment that was not toxic, because I think post Terry DeMonte for her, the environment at Shome was quite toxic. And, for her to go and work with you, and it was a joy every day. And I know that she really enjoyed that period of working with you.
Well, we had a ton of fun, a lot of laughs, and I learned a lot from her, because she's such funny, crazy, outrageous, just a real person. And she taught me a lot.
What'd she teach you?
Just how to open up a little bit more and not be such a radio guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, lay that personality on the line.
Yeah, just try to be a little bit more, so much just doing the steps of announcing.
And how'd you get up to Red Deer?
Red Deer. Well, I was working in Victoria at Jack FM.
Well, how'd you get to Victoria?
When I was in Regina, I lost my job in 2005, moved back to Calgary, and that didn't work out very well for me. And then I got a call from Gord Edlin in Victoria, and he was looking for somebody to drive. So I got to work there with AJ and Crash, a lot of great talented people there as well. They went through a bunch of different stuff, not format change wise, but they let a bunch of people go because they only wanted to do a morning show and then just have imaging throughout the day. So I lost my gig there. And then I got a call from Daryl Holeen, who was opening up a station in Red Deer. And my kids were living in Cochrane at the time. And I thought, perfect. Moved to Red Deer and we signed on 100.7 The River. Has gone through a couple of changes. Came Cruise FM. I worked there when there was Cruise, and then I kind of left, but I had an opportunity to come to Real Country.
At which point you were then paired with Randi.
Yes.
What's it like to work with Randi?
It's insane. I'm not going to lie to you. She's one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. Probably, I've worked with a lot of people. She's probably the best storyteller that I've ever met. And the weirdest things happen to her each and every day. She's one of the most open people I've ever worked for. Nothing is off limits. She'll talk about everything that happens in her life, whether it's tragic, whether it's good, whether it's funny. She's just so easy to work with. And we didn't know each other, met at a Boston Pizza in Sylvan Lake, had lunch, and had a lot of laughs. And I thought, this is going to be good. And then we just hit the ground running, and it's been amazing ever since.
So once again, you're working with somebody who had pivoted from a toxic work environment, and here you are with Randi, and the whole thing feels very much rejuvenated for her, because I've had her twice on this podcast and she speaks glowingly with you. And the second time I brought her on, she said, why aren't you talking to Vinny yet? Why are you bringing me back? And she's right. You know, I should have had you on sometime in the in-between time, but I'm glad we get to sit down and have this conversation, because I think, you know, as technology goes forward, you've really rolled with it. So we think back to the beginning of what we were talking about in 1983, and there's nothing in the studio except for a bunch of 45s and cards.
And every hour you go check the teletype, right?
Yeah.
With the stories that were coming in for news and sports, and that was it.
Did you have to peel the paper and then sort?
Yes.
Yeah. The BN Newswire. Did you ever have to time out to the top of the hour for BN News?
Every hour.
And now your timing is impeccable and no one cares.
Nobody cares. It's a different time. It's a different world, Matt.
Well, I'm looking at the studio you're in. It's got a microphone and that's it. But if we rolled this back 40 years, the place would just be like carts and records and CDs and everything, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of the technology change, though, in the last 5 years? Because it's changed more in the last 5 years than I think any other time.
I mean, there's good parts about it and there's bad parts about it. The bad parts about it is it's really tough to develop any new talent when there's no jobs anywhere. Everything is voice tracked across the country, multiple shows, multiple stations. So you're not really giving the kids coming out of school a chance to learn the craft and grow. So down the road, companies are going to go, well, where's all the talent? You didn't give them an opportunity to grow and learn.
In just a second, more with Vinny. He says he's not into stuff, but trust me, he is. And what's it like to broadcast clear across Alberta? There's more. There's always more on the episode page, including a failed attempt to use artificial intelligence to write this episode. Hey, radio, don't worry. AI is only as good as the programmers who make it.
Transcription of the Sound Off podcast is powered by the Podcast Super Friends, 5 podcast producers who get together to discuss podcasting. Sharpen your podcast and creation skills by following the show on the Sound Off Podcast YouTube or Facebook page.
This podcast supports Podcasting 2.0. If you like this show or are getting value from it, hit the boost button now. If you don't have a boost button, you can get one now at newpodcastapps.com.
You've worked at a station that played both country and pop music, and now you're doing a morning show that appears on stations that do both country and pop music.
I know, weird, right?
I mean, you think about the technological change. If I told you this about 20 years ago, you'd never guess that you'd be able to do it. So how do you approach that every morning? And I think when this was first presented to you, what did you think? Oh, I'm going to be on both country and, a traditional pop station?
I mean, it was a challenge at first because you're trying to think to yourself, content-wise, is this going to work on both stations for both audiences? But the stuff that we do is all real-life stuff, and it actually works at the end of the day.
I think the term that I've heard before is that your content is agnostic. Did you ever know that your content was agnostic?
I've never heard that term before, but thank you.
Do you think it'll be used in the imaging tomorrow?
Let's hope.
when Randi comes to you with something that is going to be real, it's going to be one of those moments, could make you laugh, could make you cry. Is there anything that is a no-go where it might be too much for the both of you to cope with?
No, we've never had that situation rise where it's like, I don't know if we should do this or not. We always just go with our gut feeling and we will talk about it because we can have an impact on one person that's listening that maybe that's happened to. Then our job is done at the end of the day. Very open about a lot of different things on the show. Randi has gone through a lot of different struggles, shared them all on the air, and she's allowed me to open up about a lot of different stuff that I've never shared on the air before. Grew up in a terrible household, domestic violence, sexual abuse. Never even thought I'd bring that up on the air before, but I have. And that's helped me, and hopefully it's helped other people as well.
And I think 10 years ago, even, we probably wouldn't have gone there, or it would have been difficult to do. But it's amazing when somebody else comes into the show or into the room, opens up about something, and then it sort of allows for everyone else around to also open up. And then I'm guessing the listeners now will open up to you as well.
Yeah, we do get the calls from the people who said, I know exactly what you're going through, or just like a thank you. Like, now I feel like I can share my story type of thing. And we do a lot of work with various organizations in town. I think it's very important wherever you're working, have to really get involved in the community. Do as much volunteer work as possible. Tie yourself to as many organizations as possible. MC, all that stuff. You are part of the community. That's part of your gig.
That day when you opened up and you were like truly honest with the audience about, traumatic stuff that had happened in the past, and the show is over and you walk outside and maybe you saw the sun, maybe you saw the snow or whatever it was outside the station that day. How deep of an exhale was it, and what did it feel like?
Oh, it was huge. I mean, like a giant weight was lifted off my shoulder, and it was very emotional at the time. I mean, I, broke up on the air, and Randi was crying on the air. I was crying, and there's been many moments like that are very real. That's what I love about our show is we can go from one extreme to the other, from laughter to crying, and all the emotions are there every day.
I think maybe in the past, it might have been like a show prep service. You might have watched some TV. It was a little bit easy back in the 80s and 90s to do your show prep because we would just videotape Seinfeld, maybe Roseanne, catch up, watch Entertainment Tonight, look at The Wire to see what had come in on a show prep service. Hopefully the other station in town didn't have the same show prep service. And okay, so what's it like today?
Today is totally different. I mean, our show prep is every night we send each other prep. Could be something that happened to us. Could be a dream that Randi had, for example.
One of the things that Randi warned me about is that you're not technically savvy, which was proved today by Cliff, who came in to fix everything before we got started.
Shout out to Cliff, the engineer.
What social media platforms are you comfortable with, and which ones are you not?
I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on the Facebook. And I'm also on the Snapchat. But I never go on Snapchat. I don't even know why I have that app.
I didn't even know that was still going. I never went on that. I drew the line at Snapchat. Do you guys have any boundaries when it comes to communication? Like if somebody sees something on television at night or an event or sending show prep to one another, like is there any downtime for you?
There's always downtime, but I mean, we're always looking for content all the time. More ridiculous, the better. In our world anyways. We just want to be entertaining. We want to have fun. We want to make people laugh and just have a good time.
How many stations are you on?
15.
What streaming services do you subscribe to each month?
As in television streaming services?
Do you have Netflix?
I got the Netflix. That's the only one I have. Well, I got Paramount, and that's about it. I watch regular TV, and I PVR everything, okay? I'm old school, Matt.
I think it's great that you PVR everything. It's the way it should be. You can just sort of skip through it. I'll give you a really bad hack. I do show prep for the show that I don't have, and every day I PVR Inside Edition, and it is just complete junk of the best stuff I can get show prep done in my head in 4 minutes of whatever went viral, of whatever murder is being covered, or whatever court trial is being covered. It's all given to me in a very short dose. And then I'm completely prepared for the show that I just don't have.
Yeah. That's a totally new ball game now too, being a program director. It's not like the old days when you were a program director and you did everything and you came up with the ideas and everything else. Nowadays, I hate to say it, but you're more of an administrative assistant. All you're doing is picking music for stations, attending meetings, and sending out emails. Back in the day, you're having, air checks and with your staff and doing all kinds of stuff. That doesn't happen very often anymore.
When was the last time you guys had a pizza party?
Actually, today.
Isn't it great to know that pizza parties and pizza lunches at radio stations just will never die?
No, they won't. Mind you, our staff is fairly small compared to when I first started here. It's probably cut in half easily. But,
a place like Red Deer, I look at the work you do now, being clear across Alberta on a lot of stations. That looks like a really enviable job. Unlike, getting up and doing mornings for one radio station in Edmonton, like to have the whole province at your fingertips.
I never thought in a million years that like anything like that would even happen, but it's hard to wrap your head around it. It's cool. And I love living where I'm living. Like, this is the end of the line for me, Matt. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm going to go to any big cities. I'm done. Old. Getting to the end of the road. I've worked in Calgary, some bigger markets, but this is where I love being. I love the community. The people are amazing here. And it's nice and relaxing.
I guess the one deficit to what you're doing in Red Deer is that, you being an Edmonton guy, it would be having to put up with Flames fans.
Here's the thing. I'm a Flames fan.
Well, you'll have to explain that.
I went to high school in Edmonton, junior high in Calgary, so I lived in both cities kind of thing. And then majority of my work was done in Calgary. I never actually worked at a radio station in Edmonton, but I got the opportunity in Calgary for over a decade. And that's when I became a huge Flames fan and a Stamps fan. So being in the middle is kind of tough because you got to put up with the Oiler fans.
So you went to high school in Edmonton.
Yep.
You went to high school in Calgary.
Junior high in Calgary.
And now you are clear across Alberta. I would say that you've landed in the perfect spot because you're not a stranger to both cities and you pretty much know the province like the back of your hand.
Yeah. And my kids live in Calgary now, which is great.
Do you ski?
Back when I was living in Calgary, we had a ski team at the radio station. We were out every weekend out Lake Louise or Sunshine or the Kiska. A lot of fun, but I haven't skied in probably 20 years.
Now I'm going to ask you to do something I'm going to ask you the most complicated question. I'm going to ask you the most difficult question because we couldn't have imagined that, 10 years ago that you would be hosting a morning show on so many stations across Alberta. What do you think the next evolution is for the show you are doing?
Worldwide, maybe? I don't know. Across Canada, I guess, would be the next thing.
Right. So that would be another time zone. And so, you'd have to get up like in the middle of the night to go and do that in the Maritimes. I don't think we would ask that of you, though, by the way.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that because I wouldn't do it.
No, of course not. Absolutely not. Vinny, did I miss anything on this show?
I don't think so. I just wanted to say, though, that I appreciate you having me on the show. And I also wanted to thank all the people that I've worked with the past 39 plus years. I always seem to surround myself with extremely talented people. Brought out the best in me. So if it hadn't been for them, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing.
And you realize that you brought out the best in others as well, right?
I don't know about that.
Come on, give yourself a little credit.
All right, maybe.
Vinny, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I super appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
The Sound Off Podcast is written and hosted by Matt Kundle. Produced by Evan Serminski. Edited by Chloe Emo Lane. Social media by Aiden Glassy. Another great creation from the Sound Off Media Company. There's always more at soundoffpodcast.com.